Call to order Prescott Valley Special Joint Study Session, April 18th, 2024. Clerk, please call the roll.
Roll call for Planning and Zoning. Chairperson Griffiths.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Evans.
Present.
Commissioner Rutherford. Commissioner Rankin.
Here.
Commissioner Borden.
Here.
Commissioner Laney.
Here.
Commissioner Erb. Okay. Roll call for Town Council. Councilmember Leyva.
Here.
Councilmember Greer.
Here.
Councilmember Dickinson.
Here.
Councilmember Hepperly. Okay. Councilmember Schumacher.
Present.
Vice Mayor Hunt.
Here.
Mayor Pagoda.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. First up and only up, item 2A, Chapter 13, Zoning Code Revision Update. Ms. Kennedy, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, for the Council Commission. It's nice to be here because we're going to be offering a joint session with our Planning Commission and Chair Griffiths and Vice Chair Evans and Planning Commissioners. Welcome. I'm having to look at different settings this time, so it's kind of nice to have us all together here to review the opportunity and have you review the snapshot of where we're at on the zoning code update. As many of you know, this code has been in place since late 1970s, and currently to today, we've had some revisions, some amendments to the code over the years, but now we're reviewing the whole code, looking at it chapter 13, section by section, because certain changes were made that reflected other areas of the code. Some of the code is antiquated. We want to bring it up to standards for new development, so we're really looking at it with a keen eye. We've hired a consultant. We've got Frank Cassidy, who you're all familiar with, helping staff on this, the staff that's been participating since I've been here, and I know it's been prior to that too. We've had neighborhood services and their code enforcement. We've had our planning and development. We've had building, our development services department representatives, but we also have had legal going through this too. So this snapshot today, we're basically going to offer you different types of formatting for it, a transitioning from a lot of code or a lot of text-based to more of a chart-based scenario. It makes it easier for our clients and for us to provide accurate information and quickly to our constituents. So we're following actually the goals too. Our general plan indicates that we need to review the town's development standards and have them intact currently. So this today will show you how we're simplifying and clarifying the code content, identify and resolve conflicting criterias. I can't tell you how many times I see my planners going from one section to another to get to the right answer. And we're going to be recommending some new articles too. So it's really a comprehensive outlook as to what we're doing, which will include comparing to the general plan. So our current areas of focus, the residential zone regulations, here's the land use table of which I was speaking about, the commercial industrial zone regulations, and then something different our consultant is going to recommend, a zoning use conversion table. So again, just keep in mind, we're trying to simplify it. We're not taking away from any zoning district. We're just going to restructure it so it's easier and it's not antiquated to the way it was originally set up. So examples of anticipated outcome, we want the public and everyone to know we're not taking away property rights, or we're not diminishing value of the properties, but in some cases we might be adding to the values, because by adding extra uses in the commercial zone, that makes the property owner, having more uses that he can attract businesses to. So we are meeting attainable housing needs. We're going to be allowing housing into most of our dense areas of town, the different commercial districts. If you want to add housing, it's with a commercial use permit, as we refer to as CUP. That'll be one example of the changes that Mr. Cassidy is going to be explaining to all of you. So having said that, I'd like Mr. Cassidy to come up and really explain more in detail. I know the anticipated questions for the charts that we have included in your packets. I think once you understand his presentation, it might make a little more sense, but today we're not voting, but your input will reflect what we're going to do moving forward. So we didn't want to get too far down the road without having your input. So without further ado, I'll have Mr. Cassidy up to the podium.
Welcome, Mr. Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the commission, Madam Chair. As Donna was saying, we've been working on this for some time now. We still meet, we meet every week. And so even when we sent out to you on April the 2nd, there have been some little tweaks because this is a work in progress. And you've seen some of this before. So I'd like to go sort of a little bit of a review on what some of the stuff you have seen, and just to remind you of. One of the things you've seen before that we've just slightly tweaked is the conversion of some of the district names, the zoning district names. We've tried to simplify them. And basically, it's as simple as taking numbers out of the zoning designations. Because right now you have R1L, and then you have a density designation. So it'll say R1L10, for example, if you have a 10,000 square foot lot size. And so we're just simplifying that to say it's RL, and then the lot size is designated after the dash. So simple stuff like that, but I think it'll make it a little bit easier. Some of the commercial zones, instead of using the numbers, the neighborhood commercial is just CN, commercial neighborhood. CG, the general commercial, is CG instead of C2. And the commercial minor industrial is CI. So simple little things like that. In terms of how we came to do the tables, and this again is a thing that I showed you an earlier version of this at one of the previous study sessions, and it's this monopoly table, if you will. It's got all these different colors. And essentially what we did is put all of the uses that are listed in your current code. Right now, they're listed over many pages. I actually provided the pages from your current code as part of your materials, and how they're simply listed in a long list of uses. And then sometimes it'll say, well, you get all the uses allowed in the C1 zone plus these uses, plus these conditional uses. Essentially what we've done is we've taken that and we put those into these tables. And we've tried our very best. The reason we did such an lengthy task of making sure that we listed them exactly as they were in the current code is to make sure we weren't changing things. So we were trying, I know that there's been some feedback, well, wait, it looks like you changed some things, but our intention wasn't to change things. There are a couple of minor details we did change that Donna referred back to, but even those are more along the lines of allowing them as conditional uses, or use permit uses, you call them in your current code, but they'll be called conditional uses. So for that, for example, is you look in the table, the commercial use table, which I should actually scroll down to here. In some of the commercial zones, you'll see now multifamily housing as a conditionally approved use, and whereas right now, most of those are not. But other than that use, the other uses that are listed here are simply taken from the many pages of listed uses in your current code and carried over into this table. We've tried to use kind of generic terminology, animal A, animal B, animal C. When you get higher in the letters, the higher, the more, you might say, obnoxious the use is. So animal C uses are uses that have more negative issues that people would be concerned about. So you'll see that those are allowed they have more restrictions as you get higher into the uses. But those particular uses then relate back to this table that I was showing you before, which kind of lumps them all together from the current code. So that's essentially how it works. We've tried, whenever there are uses that are better addressed in a separate section altogether, we've kind of dropped those into a different section. So for example, a change we actually made just in the last 2 weeks is you'll see in the residential table, you'll see church listed here. And now the version from our meeting from this week actually deletes church, because now we put it in a separate section that is basically globally dealing with churches. And now it says, you can have basically a church in any zone as long as you meet the requirements of that zone. So we don't put it in the use table. Another use that follows that is, if you remember recently, I apologize, I've got this cold that from visiting my grandkids. So it's inevitably, every time I go to visit my grandkids, I get a cold. But you just went through this process with Attorney John Palladini on, these community residences. And so we've carried those provisions that you just adopted forward. In the version of the code that you have, or of the tables that you have in front of you, I actually list community family residence and then the transitional community residence here. But in the code we've been revising the last 2 weeks, for example, those two are now put in the separate section and say, look, if you're dealing with one of those community residences, look to this section, it governs everything. There are several other uses that are dealt with that way. So for example, sexually oriented businesses, they are comprehensively dealt with in a single section. We have all of the marijuana uses. If you look in your current code, to find all of the marijuana use regulations, you have to go to like 20 different places. I actually I put all of those from your current code into a single document and then tried to boil them all down, and I boiled them down into a single section. So now if you're dealing with marijuana, you just look at that marijuana section, and we don't have to find it sprinkled throughout the code. So anyway, so that's basically the way it's going. But the piece that you're seeing is simply the tables. I'm happy to answer any questions about those if you'd like. The rest of the code we are still working on. We'll bring it in to you so that you can get a look at it. You'll probably, knowing most communities, you'll probably want to set up a blue ribbon committee or something to get a look at it before it goes through the public hearing process. Whatever it is you decide to do with the process, once the staff is ready to say, yeah, we kind of like how this is, and we'll bring it forward. But we wanted to give you at least an opportunity to give us a little bit of feedback and show you a little bit of what we're working on. So I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Council, Commission, any questions we want to address or any comments at this point? Vice Mayor, I know you have something. No, you lead us off, Vice Mayor.
Me?
Yes.
Frank, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to our Planning and Zoning Commissioners. So I have several questions, but I think you also asked us, since this isn't going to be coming to us until the fall, you also asked us to come and sit if we had more detailed questions. So I'm going to plan on doing that, but I do have some that I like to ask. So Frank, I was on a call yesterday with the league that talked about SB 1415 and AB 2720 mirror bills in the House and the Senate about ADUs. And the population requirement is moving, the requirements on the property is moving, whether or not it has to be affordable is kind of all mixed up. And the whole term, according to the league, short-term rentals has become now involved in this, whereas before the author was saying that they can't be short-term rentals, and now that's kind of out the window. So what have you heard?
This is an evolving issue. So this morning when I saw you asking this question, I went ahead and pulled down the current status of the legislation, which I have in front of you here. And then I also reached out to the league to make sure I was up to date. And basically right now this is under discussion. They're still having active conversations about this, but the version that has passed through the House and through the Senate, they have identical bills with different numbers, but the one in front of you here is the Senate bill, which is Senate Bill 1415. It only applies to 75,000 municipalities with populations of 75,000 or more. I don't think it's going to be that long before actually you reach 75,000, honestly. But in any event, you know, as your population goes up, you will end up kicking into some of these regulations if they get adopted. This particular version says that you can have a first ADU by right, and you can have a second ADU on any single-family residence as long as the second ADU is affordable. So you could actually have, on what's now a single-family residential lot, I mean, assuming, of course, you have the physical space to put a couple ADUs on there, you could have one that's not limited to affordable use, and then a second one that is. And then on the subject of short-term rentals, the trouble with short-term rentals is there's a statute that says local governments don't have any authority over short-term rentals. That's the current status of the law. You also have, from 2006, what we knew back then as Prop 207. There was a later Prop 207 on marijuana, so everybody thinks now Prop 207 is marijuana. But the 2006 version of Prop 207 was a diminution claim statute that said if a local government or even the state adopts a land use regulation that changes what you can do with your property, you as a property owner are entitled to submit a diminution claim, a claim for a diminished value of your property. Well, the trouble with the way all these things fit together is that if the legislature tries to change the short-term rental law and say, hey, it doesn't apply to ADUs, for example, it's going to reduce the rights given by that prior legislation. And so the likelihood is that people might very well submit a diminution claim. I think that's what's going through the legislature, the legislator's mind. If you look at this bill, there's a provision that says in the bill that cities and towns are prohibited from, or may not prohibit the use or advertisement of single-family dwellings or any ADUs as a separately leased long-term residential housing. So we can't prohibit, under this draft legislation, the ability of somebody to advertise their ADU for a 3-month or more lease, but it doesn't say, you know, it sort of backhandedly implies that, okay, but if it's less than 3 months, then you can prohibit the advertising of it. But I think, you know, it doesn't actually come out and say that.
I'm good. If we're at 75 here, I'm good moving on, because I don't agree with you that we're going to be 75 as quickly as you think we are, because
Oh, okay.
we've been growing like 2% a year. So anyway, we can agree to disagree on that. Next, so on the short-term rental, is there a way, because you have it listed in 2 different locations, you have vacation rental and short-term rental. Is there a way to pick this up and put it in a different section to just deal with it by itself, like you have marijuana and some of those other things?
Yes,
Iowa
yeah,
state
we
law.
could. We could take it out of the table and simply say in the, you know, in the article of the code that deals with specific uses, we could say, here are the rules with respect to short-term rentals, and basically it would say state law preempts us from essentially doing anything about it. So, yeah, we could put it there. I mean, you'll see some other examples of that for, you know, and sometimes it's because different terminology was used in the current code. So detached dwelling and single-family residential are listed in there. I could take out detached dwelling. There's no reason to have both of those necessarily in there. They mean the same thing, and I'm all for simplifying. So, sure, I don't have any issue with that. And I certainly, even on short-term rental, you could even completely take it out of the code, recognizing that state law, no matter what we say in our code, state law governs that. So we don't necessarily have to say it. The only reason to put it in would be to be user-friendly, you know, so that a person says, hey, well, what about short-term rentals? Your code says nothing about it. And then, you know, you'd say, yeah, but state law does. But if we put a separate section like you're suggesting, that could simply say, oh, by the way, if you're looking for short-term rentals, here's how those are dealt with.
Because the way it's listed here in 2 different locations and 3 if you count accessory dwelling unit, it looks like we're open for business for short-term rentals. And so that's what I'm trying to get away from. Okay, and then, welcome Commissioner Erb. It's good to see you.
Apologize for being late.
I don't see anything about, I see your manufactured, where is it? Manufactured homes is only allowed in the MH zone. But I don't see anything about factory-built, single-family homes. And we just approved a sales yard for that and have been told by the owner of that they can get 30-year leases now, and they have very much longevity like stick-built homes. So can we add something like that?
Vice Mayor Hunt, yes, we can. Really, by law, as long as it meets building codes, all the building codes, a factory-built building, and I'm not talking about a manufactured home, but like a factory-built building, in other words, one that's built to building codes, but off-site and brought back on-site in modular form, those are permitted. But we can be clearer about that if you want.
That's the way it goes,
Yeah.
I'm happy.
No,
So it's
it's-
allowed in every zone.
It is, but I would point out that there are a lot of HOAs that have private covenants that affect the ability to use, modular housing. But
Sure.
for purposes of zoning, they are permitted.
And that's current. I mean, in Unit 20 right now, Superstition Hills, there's several modular homes that are already next to stick-built homes that have been in place for years.
Yeah, that's,
Good, that makes me happy. So we had talked about this a couple times when you were here before, but I think it's at least my intent, and hopefully my colleagues agree, that the conditional use permits should not go to Board of Adjustments. And what I've experienced is they come to planning and zoning and then they come to council, because they're similar to other type of public hearings that we have for other projects. And these presumably are more intense projects. So how do you have that now?
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor Hunt, right now, the way I have that drafted is that the first step is totally administrative. In other words, it goes to the zoning administrator, and if somebody wants to appeal, it goes to the council. But I can certainly, it's easy to change if you want the planning commission to be the one to have the first look at CUPs, at use permits, what you call them right now, but we will be calling them conditional use permits. So it's kind of up to you. It's not that hard to change. The only, the reason for starting them out at the administrative level is it just speeds it up just a little bit. The ultimate right of appeal to the final decider, being the council, stays the same whether you start out at the commission or not. Certainly in Marana, when we were there, in Marana, CUPs started at the commission. If somebody appealed from the commission's decision, then it went to the council. If nobody appealed, the commission made the final decision on that. So,
And our appeal would be that a neighbor could appeal or the applicant appeal if they didn't like something.
the way we have it is it has to be somebody who has special damages, so that would be a neighbor. Under state law, special damages actually can be somebody slightly further away than a neighbor, but it has to be somebody who can show that they are injured in a way that's more than the general public. So, and that's a little hard to show. But then the other thing is, we also allow for council members to appeal, even if it's not, so any council member can also appeal if they want a
10
case
days or
to come to the full council, yes.
So real quick, does it cost that neighbor money to try to prove it? Is that what I'm hearing you say? Do they have to go to an expense?
Well, it always, all of these processes cost money, but mostly going to an administrative process, you save the time of the notice before the commission. The commission, of course, only meets less often than the zoning administrator is necessarily available. I mean, obviously, you're going to be sending notice to people anyway, you know, even, no matter if it's the zoning administrator who makes the first round decision or the commission, there's going to be a notification that, hey, this is about to happen. And then you also have a notification that, okay, here is what the decision was, and a right then to appeal if necessary to the council.
I'd like to see it go to planning and zoning and then council, but that's just my opinion. And then there's going to be, because we can't list everything, nor could we before, of all the uses that were permitted in a zone. And there is going to be some sort of a little line or paragraph that says, or other similar uses as approved by the planning director.
That's, yes, Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, that is a standard provision. And of course, the decision by the zoning administrator is appealable to the Board of Adjustment by somebody who disagrees with that interpretation, just like any interpretation of the zoning code. Because the determination of where a use fits is an interpretation of the zoning code. And an interpretation of the zoning code can be appealed to the Board of Adjustment.
So I'm done. But that means that if Donna says yes or no on a permitted use, then that person can appeal it to the Board of Adjustments, whether or not they get to do it.
Yes, typically the way that works is if she says no to the use, then the property owner will appeal to the Board of Adjustment. And if she says yes to a use and the neighbors hear about it or see something going up and saying what's going on and find out, that they can take it to the Board of Adjustment if they have special damages. I mean, they have to show that they have standing to bring it to the Board of Adjustment. But yes.
And then my only last thing, since we do have time, if we could maybe go out with a cutter and crew and look at some of these existing businesses and make sure that anything we put in here, we're not making them a non-conforming use by these changes. That's the only other thing. Thank you.
And just to respond to that, that was the point of this table, you know, honestly, is to try to look at each individual use and where does it fit in your current code and make sure that we're carrying it into the tables correctly. But, you know, I'm certainly human on this. I could have missed some subtlety about any use. So if you see something that you think isn't consistent with the current code, definitely bring it to my attention, but that was the intention.
Mr. Cassidy, just looking at this screen is like eating ice cream very fast. It just starts to give you a headache after a while.
I'll move away from it.
So what I'm hoping though in the future, if we can get, and we currently have like a colored map overlay of our current zoning, if we can get a side-by-side comparison of what our new looks like versus what our old, I think it would help just to be able to compare the two visually as opposed to going line by line, if that's possible.
We're not Mr. Mayor, we're not actually rezoning any
No,
property though. so
I understand. I'm just a more of a visual look to it as opposed to just going old, new, that type of thing. If
Okay.
you could work on that, that's all. I apologize for the misunderstanding there.
No, that's fine.
That's all I had for it. Ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Cassidy, it's a pleasure to see you, sir.
Nice to
Thank
see
you
you
for your hard work. Number one, I applaud you first and foremost for the changes you made in the density district chart. It excited me when I saw that, so thank you. And then again, your hard work on all of these charts and exhibits. I do want to make you aware that the next time I need a chart, I'm calling you. You're my man. Your hard work is greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
I do have some little comments about some broken connections to some of the articles. And I've already talked to Ms. Kennedy, and I'm going to meet with her, and we'll go over those for future input when we continue this work.
I did want to mention that the PDFs that I created that are attached to your materials are taken from a much larger document. So any hyperlink that goes beyond the pages that were provided to you is broken. So if you found broken hyperlinks, that just means that it's in a part of the code that we only sent you like 8 pages of the 150.
So I look forward to more improvements along the way.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on our team.
You bet.
And I think I say this for the council and the commission, that if anyone has any additional questions after we leave this room, to be able to email Donna directly or give her a call or schedule an appointment so we can get those directly to Mr. Cassidy, I think would be the best order. Anything else for Mr. Cassidy?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Kennedy, anything to wrap it up?
No, but actually, when we do come back in the fall, there'll be more items that we've discussed and for your input as well, but it's more of a cleaning house kind of thing. So thank you all for your input.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. Meeting adjourned.